Near mint condition, the home of collected editions.
That cover's so awesome.
This is Mr. Chris Claremont, a legend.
Melody goes,
Tired.
How's it going, all you minties? Uncanny Omar here from Near Mint Condition, the home of collected editions. And join me today for an overview of one of my most anticipated title releases of the year, the Aquaman Omnibus by Peter David. So, let's go ahead and get started. And welcome back, everybody. So, what we have here is the latest Omnibus from DC Comics. And I made a mistake. I called it Aquaman Omnibus by Peter David. But really is Aquaman by Peter David Omnibus. And here we have this cover by Jim Calafiore, who was one of the artists on the book. About, I want to say about 35%. I don't know why I give percentages. But anyway, the other big artist on the book is Marty Egeland, or Egeland. I'm not really sure how to pronounce his name. I love his artwork. I've always loved his work on Aquaman. Phil Jimenez doing the Tempest series. And then you have Howard M. Shum, Peter Palmiotti, and Tom McGraw taking the top billing along with Peter David. But really on the spine, oh, love that spine. That's a great spine. Aquaman by Peter David, Omnibus, the DC logo, and then this piece right there by Marty Egeland. Now, some people would argue and say, oh, the Aquaman needs to be bigger. Sure, but I really like this image right here. And then this painted cover. The seminal 5-year saga that changed Aquaman forever. 5 years in one omnibus is insane. Before I open this up, before I take off the dust jacket, I did want to state that this does not collect the wonderful Aquaman, the Atlantis Chronicles. That's been available in trade paperback, and it's also available in a deluxe edition. So this sets up the events that will happen in here. This really goes through, if you don't have this book, it's freaking beautiful. It sets up a lot of the characters. It's set in the past of Atlantis, if you will. Some of those characters, including the name Orin, will play a big part in this book. So this kind of gives you an idea as in case you put all of Aquaman together on one bookshelf. There is unfortunately, no collections of Eric Larson's run or Dan Jurgens' run. This is the very actually next trade paperback, The Water Bearer. And let's go back to this book. Now, the stories in here, some of them have been previously collected in trade paperbacks. As a matter of fact, there were 3 trade paperbacks, and you're looking at me or looking at the screen going, what the hell are you talking about? There's only 2. That's right, there's only 2. But 3 were in the catalog. 3 was actually solicited, and then they canceled it. Oh, and it broke my heart. It broke a lot of our hearts. But here we are with this years later. This has a lot more content than the 3 trade paperbacks would have. So let's look at the flaps here. Another awesome piece here by Marty Egeland. And then a bio on Peter David. So there you go. I do like this. At first I wasn't too keen on it. The Aquaman by Peter David Omnibus, the DC logo, and the symbol there. But it is meant to look like the Atlantis Chronicles, which you'll see show up in this omnibus. I just wish it didn't have like a glossy finish, giving it more of a weathered look. But then again, that's just me nitpicking. I think it's a cool design. Let's go ahead and crack this book open and talk about the stories found in here, show off this beautiful artwork and see what kind of extras it has, and we'll look at the binding and do a quick little comparison to the art in the trade paperback editions. All right, let's open up the not Atlantis Chronicles Omnibus. So there's your end sheets. There's an iconic image right there, a piece of the cover there by Mike Mignola, and some more of that badass. I want to make sure I pronounce, please, if you know in the comments how to pronounce Martin's last name, Egeland or Egeland, let me know. But here are different covers, including this one right here, which there's a little bit of background behind that cover, including the why Peter David, but we'll talk a little bit about that here in a second. You do have a table of contents. I got super excited when I saw there was an introduction by Peter David because, as some of you all may know, Peter's health hasn't been the best. He's been in the hospital dealing with a lot of issues with kidneys and dialysis and heart problems. Anyway, I was really happy to see that, but unfortunately, it is the introduction that they used for the 2017 release of the trade paperback. So it's the one I was showing earlier, this one here, with that awesome cover. But regardless if you've never read the introduction, it's really awesome how, he even, not for a second, doubted himself how he would become the ongoing writer of this character, because a lot of people are like, ugh, really? I remember one time my buddy, Jeff Hartz, rest in peace, dude, miss that guy. He was friends with a band called Ukla the Mock, and they wrote a song, and I think it was a lyric or the song was like, not even Peter David could make Aquaman cool, or something like that. I can't remember, but Peter David got upset about that because in his eyes, he made Aquaman cool. And in my eyes, he made Aquaman really freaking cool. So let's talk about what's collected in here. Collected in here is Aquaman 0 through 49, Aquaman 1 through 4, and the Aquaman miniseries Time and Tide 1 through 4, and Tempest 1 through 4. The book has 1,464 pages and retails for $150. So that is the main contents of the book. But there are a couple things they haven't advertised for some reason. It does also collect Aquaman 1 million, which is interesting that they didn't put it here, and the lead into the Tempest story from Showcase 96. So I'm not sure why they haven't solicited as collecting those issues, because I think, to me, I think the 1 million issue, even though Peter David didn't write it, I think it's important to the story because it kind of shows where Atlantis might be or where it's going. So what the miniseries Time and Tide is, it's a miniseries that kind of retells the origin of the character of Arthur Curry. It is a miniseries that relies a little bit on the idea that there is an Atlantis Chronicles, which is what you'll see here towards the beginning whenever Aquaman is sitting here and reading. That's what I meant, that it's based on that. He's reading it and then writing down his own journey about how he came to be. So it's not really like Aquaman Year 1, kind of like Born to Run or Batman Year 1 or that Man of Steel series. Actually, it is kind of like Man of Steel in a way. It goes through the different years of Aquaman. His first time he was ever called a hero, and you can find out what that means exactly when he teams up with the Flash to take on the Trickster there. And then this is a very important story. It may not seem like it at first, but to me, it shows, the relationship between the dolphins he was raised with, the humans that influenced him, and then something of a love that was lost. So that's what this is, because this introduces us to this one character that will play a part, not just in the miniseries, but later on, she will come back with something very important, and that is Kako. And then, of course, the different mythos and villains that he'll be facing. And speaking of villains, issue number 4, by the way, all of this drawn by Kirk Jarvinen. I was actually talking about him when I did my What If overview. That shows the Ocean Master, and then, of course, Happier Times when he was married to Mira, and you had Aqualad there and Aquagirl, and everything was just fine until it all fell apart. So the success of that miniseries was great. Like, I mean, people weren't expecting it to sell that well, because Aquaman really didn't have a series after Crisis on Infinite Earths. We had the short-lived, I think it was only like 3 issues, and then they claimed it was a miniseries, where he had like that blue outfit that you'll see later on here. It's like the blue camouflage outfit that he wears. But it got canceled after, like, I want to say like 3 issues. So what's happening here is that, by the way, just, I guess there are some plot points I'm going to be talking about because this is a big book. So I guess just minor spoilers going in. Nothing too big. I am going to talk about why he has not a hook, a harpoon for a hand, and why he has this bearded, long-haired look that people are like, oh, it's Jason Momoa, but long before Jason Momoa. So what's happening here is that after reading the Atlantis Chronicles, he's kind of exiled himself, and he just wants to be left alone. So Aqualad comes looking for him. So he's like, dude, where have you been? And why do you look like crap? And he wants to be left alone. And of course, you know, he tells him that, look, there's a nuclear submarine that's less like they've lost down here. We need to go and help these people out. So they have a team up, and that's where they meet this character. And this character is going to impact Aquaman's life. And that is none other than Piranha Man. But he goes by a different name. This is the character of Charybdis. And what he's trying to do is he's trying to get Arthur Curry, Aquaman, to reveal how he has the ability to communicate with sea creatures. Aqualad is in his own adventure. He thinks he sees Tula down here. And you'll find out exactly what happened to some of these characters in case you're not familiar with the world of Aquaman. So what this guy does is eventually, you know, he tortures him and they have a huge fight. And what happens is that he puts his hand in a little pond of piranha, or river of piranha. Now, Arthur can communicate with sea life, right? But at this point, these are just flesh-eating creatures, so they can't really talk back to him and he can have a conversation with them like, hey, what are you guys doing? But that's what happens. He gets his flesh eating off of his hand. So for a while, you know, he's still wearing the classic orange-green outfit. Dolphin, who is kind of... She's been around for a while, but Peter David brings her back into the main part of the story. She helps him out. There's a quick little battle with people inside of his head, including some of his failures in the past. And what he ends up doing is he puts a harpoon in for a hand. So through here, you're going to see other characters appear as part of the supporting cast of Aquaman. Mainly the Throne in Atlantis. Garth playing a big part. Aqualad, and then Dolphin as well. But there is another character that will show up. This is the battle with Superboy, and he goes from one thing to another. Eventually, he does end up like fighting in Japan. And this has a horrible storyline that comes, like, no, I don't mean like it's a bad story, but something bad because of what happens in this issue comes back to haunt him. There's a fight with Lobo where Lobo ends up just ripping his shirt open, and then he's just going to be wearing this gladiator type of armor. So he's like, okay, no more orange shirt. So this is the character that I was talking about. This is a character that will play a big part in his life. And no, I'm not talking about Volko, but I feel like I need to talk about this really quick. There is a reason why Garth and Volko are in this library, and Garth is trying to learn about how to maybe raise the dead. So it's stories like that. It's this character of Koryak. Now, he has relations to both Kako, who I talked a little bit about earlier, that was in the Time and Tide miniseries, and he could have some kind of relationship with Arthur himself. So much so that he becomes a huge part of this ongoing series, as well as Dolphin, as well as Garth, and a few other characters that will show up through here. Now, if you're wondering, wait a second, but he's married to Mira, where is she? There is a storyline that explains what happened to Mira and where she could be, and that is all explained through here. This is the character of Deadline, who had gone after Starman. And then we start getting the annuals. By the way, the annuals are... I was going to do a custom binding of this series because I didn't think DC was ever going to do it, but I agree with the way they put the actual annuals. I think they're in the proper reading order, with the exception of the fourth one. I think the fourth one should have been before the last story arc, but that's just, like I said, that's neither here nor there. So year one is kind of a retelling of the character of Arthur and his story throughout just the different times of his life. When things were simpler, there's Mira, and then when he encountered the Justice League and to where he is now. Here's his run-in with Green Lantern. I'm not going to talk about each of these issues, but gosh, man, his art is just so good. So Mira does come back, and so does the Aquaman with that blue camouflage that I was talking about. And you can find out exactly what all of that means later on, because there are revelations through here as to where Mira has been. There's a character of Kordax that is through here, and he showed up in the Atlantis Chronicles, but he plays a bigger part in this. This is also the era where Aquaman wants to be left the hell alone. So even the Justice League that tries to come and get him are like, okay, I guess Arthur wants to be alone. We need to respect his wishes because he just kicked the crap out of most of us. So there's time travel through here. There's other dimensions through here. And then the return of Aqualad. However, he is not quite Aqualad anymore because he is going to go through some changes. And you're going to see that both Egeland and Jim Calafiore are going to be switching in and out. So there's both of them, I think, equally through here. There's a lot of Martin towards the beginning, but then you get a lot of Jim Calafiore later on through here. Now, what was I saying? Oh, yes, the character of Aqualad will no longer be known as Aqualad because he's going to go through some changes in here. And oh my gosh, Deep Blue. That is the one character that will make all of this seem a little bit dated in the way that she speaks. There's a lot of pop culture references, and even some of the slang that she talks in is like, even back then was, that's a little too much. So you do get to see all kinds of different characters through here. So even if you're not familiar with the mythos of Aquaman, you do get a bunch of characters, and Peter David does an amazing job of introducing them to you. This is really cool because this is the Tempest series. This is a heartbreaking series, by the way, where you see the character of Garth go from Aqualad to the character of Tempest and what makes him grow up, right? You see Tula through here. Is that set in the past? Is it another dimension? Because as I said, there are stories that, you know, they're time travel stories, but there's also like dimension hopping stories through here. And I don't want to reveal exactly what happens there, so we're going to skip here and go through this is the Elseworld annual. So you'll see a lot of characters, like a different version of them through the Elseworld annuals. I think they were called, it wasn't Elseworld, but I mean, it was an Elseworld type of story. Legends of Dead Earth, that's what they were. So you're going to see like different versions of Ocean Master, of characters that have just recently appeared that you've met, like the character of Kordax through here, and then Koryak. But we get back to the main story, and there's Deep Blue. But Deep Blue doesn't come alone. Like, she kind of shows up with the rest of the Ocean Masters, not the villains, but the people that are in charge of the seas. Like, you have the character of Atlan that plays a big part through here. What is the Guardian of Arion? Arion plays a part through here. And of course, Garth and Tsunami, who has ties to the character of Deep Blue that I was talking about. And then, you know, you've got Arthur and Dolphin. Now, something's going on here where the character of Shark does something to Aquaman and changes his body. So then the character of Swamp Thing gets involved. And there are several changes, including, you know, the webbed hand that will be happening through here. And this is the crime noir type of story from the 3rd annual. And I think this right here is a Final Night tie-in, if I'm not mistaken, because this is the Parademon storyline. Where he's just after, no, the Genesis, because there are a couple of tie-ins. There's Final Night, there's the Genesis, which hasn't been 100% collected. The main story arc of Genesis has been collected in the 4th World by Jack Kirby Omnibus Volume 2. But the main event has been collected, not the rest of it. You have the fight against Dr. Polaris, Maxima showing up through here. And I think that's all I will say about it. So you are going to see some returning characters like Ocean Master. You might see a version of Black Manta through here. And then there is part of the crossover. This is the crossover with the Millennium Giants with Superman and Supergirl. That's one that has not been collected in any format, trade paperback or nothing. There are about 30 issues in here that have never been collected, by the way. This is a huge accomplishment for DC. This means a lot to us that have been waiting years for a collection like this. And here's the thing. And please don't let this turn you away from reading any of this, because it is so damn good. You always see a division between what is the fight against Triton, and then of course later on Poseidon. But what is the best Aquaman run? And a lot of people will say Jeff Johns. Yeah, Jeff Johns is a lot easier to get into. But for me, I think Peter David's run is perfect. I love it. I love everything he did with the character. You know, some people would roll their eyes and saying, "Oh man, he's just so edgy." But that was the 90s, and honestly, you had to do something different and drastic with the character of Aquaman. There was a reason why people were making fun of Peter David. By the way, Star Labs later on gives him a harpoon. I think it's in issue 5, so it's not that much later on when his original harpoon arm gets destroyed, that it's got a retracting harpoon. Oh, it's so badass. But like I was saying, you have to make him different. You couldn't make him this clean-cut guy that people were like, oh, he just talks to fish. You had to make him a badass. And Peter David understood that. Peter David understood, I love this introduction when he talks about, you know, if you take Arthur out of the water and you put him in downtown Gotham, like in the dark alley, he's not a character that would be scared, right? Like, bullets would bounce off of him because he's used to just living in that, the pressure that would go up against his skin. Whereas you take Bruce Wayne and you put him underwater, he would just get killed. Like, that's, hey, Peter David's words. Don't quote me. I'm just saying that. I thought that was a really cool introduction. Now, what I was saying as to don't let this turn you away, unfortunately, and you can read about the behind the scenes, how this happened. I think this is his final issue, if I'm not mistaken. 46, I think, is his final issue. Issue 46 ends in a huge cliffhanger with the return of the classic Arthur Curry. And issue 47 is written by Dan Abnett and Andy Lanning. So there were some behind-the-scenes issues happening, and Peter David was not happy, and he left the book. Now, it is up to Dan Abnett and Andy Lanning to come in and, you know, wrap up a lot of these loose ends, and including that story, what happens to Mira, who are these characters, what's going on with Tempest. And then they also did the 1 million story right here, which shows us where Atlantis is, or where it could be in 1 million. That was all part of the crossover. That has been collected before. And then annual number 4. Now, they do wrap up annual number 4 with Peter David, wrapping up this story right here. This is a sad story. I don't even want to tell you what it's about, but it does have ties to something that happened in Aquaman's past. And censoring that final page, because the only 2 pages of extra is the interview with Tempest, and then the cover to Aquaman Time and Tide by Kirk Jarvinen. So even though he didn't get to wrap up the story and probably could have gone a lot longer, because we know what he was wanting to do with the hand and his beard and eventually what was going to happen to Aquaman, it's still one damn good story and definitely worth a read. I do want to stress the fact that even though it may seem like when some of these writers, I mean, look at John Byrne, right? It's not going to keep you away from reading John Byrne's run on just about anything. But even like John Byrne's run on Fantastic Four, right? He didn't wrap it up the way he wanted to because there were some issues and he was like, deuces, I'm out. All right, let's look at the binding and then talk about the build here. 1,464 pages. It's a pretty big eye. Let's look at the way it lays over, because more importantly, how does it lay over with, I mean, 1,464 pages sewn binding? That's a big book, but we've seen bigger books. But the key is, how does it lay over whenever there's spread pages? So we're looking somewhere at the very back. This is the DC 1 million Aquaman. There is just a little bit of gutter loss, not much. Honestly, that's really good all the way back here. As far as the paper stock, it is printed in this new satin type of paper that they've been using for the last few, actually, most of the year here. So it's a little bit thinner than the glossy paper stock they used to use. Both Marvel and DC have been using thinner paper, and there is more bleed through. Is it a deal breaker? Absolutely not. Not when you're talking about Aquaman. And there is a lot of white, believe me. As a matter of fact, I wanted to compare the trade paperback here, especially just a couple scenes, with the Omnibus edition, just seeing if there's a difference in the color. So the trade paperback uses it's glossy paper, but it feels thinner than the paper stock they're using here in the Omnibus edition. So if you're worried about all the white space, that's something that they've always used, even in the trade paperback editions. You know, sometimes I wish both Marvel and DC would just make the artwork go as much. I like it bigger, so of course I want it as big as possible, especially when it's somebody art that I really enjoy. I want it as big as possible. So yeah, this is the comparison. It's still bigger, right? Like, this is definitely bigger, but that white space was always part of the even the comic book was printed like that. The way that the covers are collected in the Omnibus edition are complete. Like, they actually have the text and everything on them, just like the trade paperbacks. But they do have a frame around them. So, no matter if you're looking at issue number 1 or later on in issue 43. But that is it. One of my most anticipated omnis of the year is finally here. that, as they say, is that. If you're interested in purchasing this omnibus, don't forget to check out our sponsors.
If you're in Europe and you're interested in buying these books, definitely check out Walt's Comic Shop in Berlin, Germany. They have the cheapest pre-order prices, flat shipping rate of €12 for all EU countries, emails answered within 24 hours, waltscomicshop.com, and you can use the code nearmintcondition at checkout and get free shipping for all EU countries with your first order over €40. That's Walt's Comic Shop, your reliable source for omnis and premium collected editions in Europe. Ding!
CheapGraphicNovels.com, your online home for graphic novels and collected editions up to 50% off cover price. They have excellent shipping and prompt and helpful service. Check out their bargain deals for up to 90% off cover price. And don't forget that CGN also takes pre-orders. That way you don't miss out on the hottest releases. And they are currently running a special promotion for you Minties. If you're a first-time customer, after receiving your order confirmation email, reply back to that email and let them know Near Mint Condition sent you their way. They will then apply a free shipping promotional credit to your next order in the US. Cheap Graphic Novels, your source for the hottest books with the kind of deep discount, quality shipping, and customer service that will keep you coming back for more. And that was the content, the page count, and build of this omnibus. Let me know in the comments down below if you plan on picking this up, if you are hoping one day we'll get a third volume of the cancel volume Aquaman trade paperbacks, or if you're hoping maybe we'll get a DC Finest one day. And then if you want a follow-up to the series, the Eric Larson series, and then the Dan Jurgens, oh man, I would love for this era to be collected, and more Aquaman in omnibus format. Any questions, leave those down below. Smash that like button on the way out. Everybody stay healthy and safe out there. Much love.